Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Okay, so now kind of moving on to a broader topic, which is Google's directive or advice to SEOs that they not pay attention to ranking signals. For some time, Google has been arguing that we should create content for people, hence the helpful content update, and not for search engines. And that this sort of focus, all this tactical focus on particular ranking signals and tactics that we're talking about right now is really not as important as a kind of holistic approach where you're building good content, quality content for the user. And, the world is a place where peace and love prevail. It's the right advice at the highest level. Create quality content for people, solve real problems, deliver good information. But it strikes me as incredibly naive from a sort of a industry standpoint that Google has created lots of incentives, both consciously and kind of unwittingly, and it has created this world that it is now decrying. And people are compelled to do these things in order to rank, which is critical to business success. So there's this kind of strange, it's not exactly a paradox. I mean, Google has created the situation that it now is kind of critical of. And there's
the contradictions of a dialectical relationship.
Yes, by Mike Blumenthal, available.
They don't call him Professor Maps for nothing.
Yeah.
And the exact same thing happened with reviews. They create a marketplace, the importance of them, they accentuate them, they make them a ranking factor, and then all of these markets, illicit and otherwise,
then they wonder why there's fraud.
And then they don't do anything about it, right? They take years and years and years for them to even come up with an algorithm that can filter some of this stuff, and then it filters the wrong stuff. So it's like, it is very, very weird that they create these marketplaces, illicit marketplaces, or marketplaces that focus on the wrong thing, and then turn around and say, be a good person.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent Google's hands are tied, right? Because they can't reveal too much, and I'm not defending it in any stretch, but they can't reveal too much of the algorithm or else spammers will sort of take advantage of it to the detriment of all users. And at the same time, there's only so many signals that their algorithm can look at. And so, they don't have, it's not like they have that many options to like assess content quality aside from signals like links and click-through rates and those kinds of things. Like, it's a pretty known set of factors at this point. So I just think disingenuous isn't a strong enough word, but this sort of
hypocrisy is a word you could use.
Hypocrisy, yeah, maybe. But this kind of tone and these kinds of instructions has been around, again, for as long as that space. All of the sort of contentious link building panels with Matt Cutts back in the day. I mean, this was the same general stance that he took, and it's kind of been the party line from Google for a long time. So I just think, and the problem is that, if you haven't been an SEO a long time, you're sort of taking everything Google says as gospel. If you're an executive who doesn't understand SEO, you're probably taking everything Google says as gospel. And that's not great for the industry, and it's not great ultimately for the performance of your website.
So one question, rather than just sort of continue to complain, which we could do at length, one question is how does Google actually solve this problem? How does Google actually get people to create high quality content for humans and not for search engines? What would you, if you were, Google's hired you as a consultant?
But yeah, they find a way to reward that, right, algorithmically. But the reality is, like, even if a solo doctor writes this amazing guide on plantar fasciitis, it's never going to outrank the Mayo Clinic. So, like, that advice is just not true.
Well, I mean, is this just a sort of an unsolvable problem then?
I, I mean, I think it's at least in the current search paradigm, it feels pretty unsolvable. I think that there's who knows exactly what's coming out with, SGE and all this stuff. I think some of the EEAT user, user rater quality guidelines I think are intended to go in this direction where, they're looking at this in highly critical, your money or your life categories, and real people are making the evaluation of like, is this a good piece of content or not? And if it's a bad piece of content, it drops and other pieces of content have a chance to compete. But the internet is such a huge place. And again, there's only so many signals algorithmically that Google can use to determine credibility just to be in that game of like potential results. So I don't know that it's necessarily solvable, but I do think what is solvable is for Google to be more honest with webmasters and marketers with some of these kinds of comments.
Do you think more transparency? I mean, David, you said that more, kind of openness about the algorithm would be problematic for reasons that
Yeah,
Google has
that's
long stated.
that's fine.
You
Like
know,
I said, yeah, and
but
I'm not encouraging Google to like open up its algorithm, and maybe regulators will at some point require that. But I don't.
well, in
I'm not
Europe, it's
encouraging
starting to
Google.
happen.
Yeah, I'm not encouraging Google to do that at all. What I am saying is like, come out and say like, hey, we try to reward high quality content, but just because you create a piece of content for users does not mean it's going to rank. And you really do need to look at things like search volume and the number of backlinks you have and the quality of those backlinks to assess whether you should be creating content in this category at all and how you should be structuring that content. Like that's a much more transparent and helpful piece of advice rather than the
But
rainbows
it
and
goes in the
unicorns that.
opposite direction. Right, but it goes in the opposite direction that they're going in. I mean, that would be sort of back toward the signals and back toward the ranking factors, and that what they're trying to do is get entirely away from that and say, oh, these ranking signals don't really matter. It's really all just about your holistic approach to content. Yet that's just transparently not true.
Yeah, and
To go
great,
move back into
amazing that that's
the
Google's
rant.
goal, right? If that's the company goal internally is to like move the algorithm in that direction, again, that's another way they could frame this, but to like completely beggar the reality of the current situation with these comments, and it lacks credibility, and it's as you said, potentially even hypocritical.
Yes, so we have to say something positive before we end today because that's a downer. That's a bummer, man.
I guess I
Um,
don't see it as a bummer because
so
it's
I think
like I said, it's been Google's track record for as long as I've been in SEO. So it's not
you're
necessarily a downer; it's just
yeah,
reality.
you're a
Like I don't know.
realist.
Yep, I'm a
You're a
realist. That's
realist.
right.
Well, I would say that the research that we've been doing is really interesting and exciting, and we'll be presenting it at local SEO for Good today. And there's a lot of nuanced things, as we talked about in the beginning with Mike's discussion, that we're learning about user behavior that are not generally part of the conversation, which operates on a higher level. And so I think that that's something that I'm very encouraged by and interested in. And we're learning things that we didn't know from the sort of general local SEO discussion. So that's a semi-positive thing. That was my attempt.
Good work.
And
See you
the
next
weather is
week.
getting better in the San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah, and for everybody who's listening to this ahead of the American Labor Day holiday, have a great weekend. If you're elsewhere in the world, you too. We will not publish on Monday in observance of Labor Day, but we will be back next week with more insights and occasionally humorous takes on local search issues.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.